There are many significant and progressive laws, such as the Women in Development and Nation Building Act, and more recently, the Magna Carta for Women. The Philippines was the first country in Asia to have an anti sexual harassment law, which has recently been expanded in the Safe Spaces Act. During the administration of President Cory Aquino, the first Philippine Development Plan for Women was launched, followed by several successor plans. The significance of these national plans for women was that, as companion to the Philippine Development Plan, they ensured that women's issues, and women's contributions were part of national planning and programming and the work of all government agencies. Government working for women has also been enhanced by the creation of the gender budget, which sets aside 5% of the budget of all government agencies for programs on gender equality and women's empowerment. Beyond national policy, there are international covenants on women's rights that have played important roles. The most central of these are the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women and the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. The Philippines is signatory to these and asked to report regularly on compliance. It must be noted that Filipino women played major roles in the crafting of these landmark global blueprints. And while the United States is celebrating its first woman vice president, the Philippines has had two woman vice presidents and two woman presidents, and some extraordinary women in high positions. But along with legislation, policy, and leadership, women's role in nation building is driven at the grassroots level by a strong and vibrant women's movement, women NGOs that push for and support progressive laws and policies and make their voices heard on important issues. Gender equality and women's empowerment in the Philippines is propelled by what the women's movement refers to as the Bibingka principle. It has fire on top in progressive and enlightened legislation, policy, and leadership, and fire at the bottom in well organized, dynamic, and courageous NGOs. So there is a lot working for women in the Philippines. But there are problems. Things are not as rosy as they may seem. Women outnumber men in school enrollment and graduation, but these accomplishments in education do not necessarily reflect in better access to decent jobs, nor to parity in work and promotion opportunities. Men's average wages are higher than that of women in both rural and urban areas, and women are underrepresented in top administrative and managerial positions and in political leadership. We see that de jure equality or equality in law is a necessary but not sufficient condition for de facto equality or equality in fact. The huge advances in creating and improving legal frameworks on women's rights have not always translated into women actually enjoying these rights, as social norms continue to pose a challenge to gender equality. Negative attitudes and stereotypes exist and operate in society. This is particularly obvious in politics, where factors of entrenched discrimination operate. A large percent of the population believe that men make better political leaders than women. Thus, women continue to be seriously underrepresented as candidates for public office, although they make up at least half of the electorate. In some cases, the growing involvement of women in political life and leadership has actually been met with intimidation and violence. Violence against women, sadly, is present in many forms: domestic violence, rape, sexual harassment, and lately, misogynistic statements in public coming from the very top. Misogyny is not a new phenomenon. More subtle forms of misogyny have been around. Gutter and locker room language and jokes are encountered everywhere, from boardroom to beer garden. And aggressive and outspoken women are viewed with ambivalence, not just by the man at the top and other men, but at times by women themselves. What makes the present misogyny different is that it is loud and public, with no fear of consequences. Is this misogyny tolerated or explained away as simply a peculiar brand of humor or part of male culture or a harmless personality quirk? Or is it recognized for what it is and met with the appropriate outrage? I'm afraid we know the answer. It's a quote from my favorite paragraph in the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. Paragraph 41 reads, and I quote, "The advancement of women and the achievement of equality between women and men are a matter of human rights and a condition for social justice, and should not be seen in isolation as a women's issue. They are the only way to build a sustainable, just, and developed society. Empowerment of women and equality between women and men are prerequisites for achieving political, social, economic, cultural, and environmental security among all peoples." End of quote. So to the new generation of women leaders, I say, leadership is your right, but it is also your duty and your contribution to building our nation.